The most diabolical inner constraint to freedom I want to call to mind now is as hard for us to discover as it is for a fish to discover water. And what I'm referring to is the inner constraints of dominant ideologies. Our submission to common sense assumptions that rule our lives, which are hidden in plain sight. Erich Fromm and others refer to dominant ideologies as what passes for common sense ideas and values that just seem normal and natural or just the way things are, but which are in fact just learned assumptions that are culturally formed and thus capable of question. For example, we may not question that democracy is the political system most in keeping with the nature and needs of humans. History has, in this view, been an evolution of political forms towards democracy. And once states have achieved democracy, all they have to do is avoid reverting. There is no farther to go in terms of political organization. You see, this is an assumption. We assume that democracy is the political system best suited to the nature and aspirations of humans. We see history as a movement towards democracy. We assume that once all nations have achieved democracy, they will continue to be democracies forever unless they erode. These assumptions are an example of ideology. Do we really think we're at the end of history? That mankind has no further to evolve in terms of political systems? Similarly, capitalism is assumed, or has been until recently, to be the most natural state of human social relations. It's viewed historically as freeing humans from traditional constraints of social structure, and as such, is seen as the hallmark of a free society. It is viewed as contributing to an increase of positive human freedoms, self-determination, active empowerment. However, as Fromm and others point out, it has also left the individual more isolated, more insignificant, more powerless to be other than a wage slave. The current debate about global climate change also calls into question the rationality of capitalism, the rationality of a limitless exploitation of resources, and the myth of perpetual, endless economic growth that attend the capitalist ideal. Do we really believe that this is the best we can do? That humankind can evolve no further in terms of social political order? That increasing our private wealth and producing and buying endless stuff is the full realization of our human potential? Those who are calling currently for a return to the economic status quo of the way things were before the global financial crisis are missing the point. The status quo was the problem. Our views of human sexuality and relationships, it seems to me, are still in the dark ages. For example, the common sense notion of marriage is the dominant one is that between a man and a woman. But only if your dominant way of thinking about relationships is based in gender. How about love and commitment as a basis for marriage rather than gender? Whether it's between people of opposite sexes or people of the same sex, you see, it's possible to make a case for and shift the dominant view to be more generous and inclusive if we just think about it a little. Further, ideology's cultural activity also includes the construction of pseudo-problems, which are given pseudo-solutions. For example, our culture's obsessions with stories about love, which are solved by individuals realizing the true worth of the other, as if these issues were really central to our most fundamental human concerns, our moral and mental health, the justice and equity for which the world is calling out. All sorts, this is the point, all sorts of moral and social problems get disappeared in the process of indulging the myth of romantic love that dominates films, TV, and books. I mention these examples of ideology, democracy, capitalism, sexuality, and the pseudo-problem of romantic love, not because I think they're bad, but simply to point out that common sense notions we take for granted may be called into question, challenged, and shifted. And so they should be. We seem free, but are everywhere in chains, to paraphrase Rousseau. And if we are to carry on the tradition of freedom we inherit, we should be seeking, should we not, at the least, to liberate the 1 square foot of real estate we have any real control over, which is up here. And these minds of ours, being merely forgivably human, have a tendency to think non-dialectically. You know dialectic: thesis, antithesis, synthesis. An idea meets its opposite and a new idea is formed. We don't have a tendency to think in these terms. The process repeats itself like a wheel, and this is the essence of enlightened debate. Enlightened debate, the foundation of free churches and free societies. And it's a fraught, messy, confrontational process that often seems to lead to no resolution, no rest, for dialectical thinking is endless. And so our desire for mental comfort may prevail. But in our hearts, we know the desire for comfort is a species of sloth. As Unitarians, ours is supposed to be a questioning spirit. We know it is never the answer that enlightens, but the question. Identifying inner constraints such as common sense is hard. Like fish in a fishbowl, which do not know that they are in water, we often move unaware of the assumptions, the ideologies in which we live and move and have our being. Whoever discovered water, it wasn't the fish. But humans are not fish. For unlike them, we have the ability to stand outside our thoughts and question them. The fish cannot live fully fishy lives out of the water, but we can only live fully free, fully human lives, negotiating both inside and outside the water of our own ideas. That's a tougher gig. Sorry. But welcome to the species and the church. Eric Fromm makes a key distinction in this great book: freedom from and freedom to. We may be free from old despots, old traditions, old social structures that oppressed women, oppressed our highest thoughts and deepest yearnings of the past, but we are then free to do what? Freedom from is not the same as freedom to. There is what I consider one of the less graceful threads of Unitarian behavior that delights in bashing spiritual religious authority, that loves nothing more than to pick fights with the orthodox, who, like the perpetual adolescent, rails, "You can't tell me what to think, Mom and Dad." You're free from that kind of authority, free from the unthinking superstition of religious tradition. But what are we free to do? And so we define ourselves in opposition to our parents, our forebears, but like the adolescent who is only aware that he is not like his parents, I maintain that such an adolescent is not truly free, for he's fixated on what's been done to him, not on what he can now do. Eric Fromm's contemporary, Jean-Paul Sartre, said, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." Let me repeat that. Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. Freedom from is a point of beginning rather than an end of our freedom of thought. We inherited this, but I would like to suggest that we are not done yet. The first step, I think, must be to work to emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds, as Bob Marley sang in the opening prelude. Getting to a point where we can have an active engagement with common sense ideologies as part of our everyday thinking. But here's the question. Can we totally unmoor ourselves from what's been done to us, what's been given to us, what's gone before us? Of course not. Like the adolescent, let's call him Dwayne. Like Dwayne, the adolescent rebel without a cause who seeks only release, he can only reflect whatever is inside of him. And he usually finds in time that there is more of his parents in him than he would have thought. Adolescent dallying with license is a necessary phase, I guess, but not an end in itself. That kind of freedom, that kind of busting out, I'm not going to take it anymore freedom, can often lead to substance abuse, car wrecks, rampant promiscuity. How free does that sound? You can only be free in any real sense if you are, to some degree, bound. It's a paradox.